I didn't pawn the ring out of desperation. I pawned it out of defiance. See, when a woman trades her wedding band for half a loaf of rye, it ain't just hunger talking, it's memory. That ring had been slipping looser on my finger each month since he passed, like even the metal knew it didn't belong anymore. My name's Clara Dean, widow, mother of two, and when this all began, I'd gone 3 days on nothing but hot water and prayer. June, my youngest, couldn't lift her head that morning. Henry tried to play strong, said he wasn't hungry, but I saw him lick crumbs off the windowsill when he thought I wasn't looking. Pride don't hold up against a 10-year-old belly. I told him I was headed to fetch flour. That was a lie. We hadn't had flour in 6 weeks. Instead, I walked to the alley behind Weaver's. The butcher'd started tossing scraps again, bone bits with more splinters than meat. I had my shawl tied like a sack, hoping for fat or rind or even just the idea of something edible. What I found instead was a tin plate, still warm. Corn mush, half a biscuit, and a slice of smoked pork so rich the grease had bled through. No note, no knock. Just heat. I looked up and down the alley. Nothing. No one. I ran home fast as my legs could take me. June wept when she smelled it. I let Henry eat most. I only had a few bites. My body rejected it at first, like the kindness of it startled my stomach. That night, I held my wedding ring. I thought about pawning it every week, but that night was different. That food meant someone saw us, not pitied, saw. By next afternoon, I did it. Walked into Calhoun's trading and laid that band on the counter. He turned it over like he was inspecting a horseshoe for flaws. Thin, he said. I didn't speak. 3 bites of bread, maybe 4. I nodded. He wrapped half a loaf in paper. No salt, no butter, just coarse bread with air pockets bigger than coin holes. I carried it like it was a newborn. We split it 3 ways. June managed 2 chews, then fell asleep against my arm. Henry had tried to save a corner, but I watched him eat it anyway an hour later when her breathing slowed. That night, I went back to the alley. I wasn't begging. I was bargaining with whatever ghost had left that plate. And sure enough, it was there again. A full pan this time. Beans, warm bread, a cut of apple. And a man, just beyond the light, wide hat, trail-dusted boots, leaning against the side wall like he was part of the structure. He didn't speak, didn't move, just tipped his chin once, then walked away. Next evening I followed. He led me straight to the saloon. Didn't drink, didn't play, just sat in the corner like he was waiting on something to die or come back. I stayed hidden by the doorframe, heart pounding. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know why he was feeding us, but I aimed to find out. I ain't the kind of woman to trail a man into a saloon, but hunger will cut them kinds of habits right out of you. He sat like the world owed him stillness, boots planted, hands quiet on the table, eyes fixed on nothing. The barkeep offered a pour. He waved it off without speaking. Just a flick of the fingers. The saloon was near empty. Most folks in Granger had either died, fled, or turned to thieving. Sheriff Crowley said order would return with the crops, but the soil had quit listening to promises. I stepped inside, not soft neither. Let the boards creak under my weight. Let him hear me come. He didn't flinch. I took the table next to his, waited. After a while, a miner stumbled in and slumped near the stove, said something about a cousin starving out by Dust Creek. That's when the man, my stranger, spoke. "I don't owe him," he said, voice low like the sound of a knife being unsheathed. "I owe her." That was when I knew he wasn't talking about charity. He was talking about a debt. I turned. "You talking about me?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Why the food?" I pressed. Still nothing. Just those damn eyes. Gray, storm deep, but not unkind. "You following us?" I asked. At that, he stood, not abrupt, like a man remembering his knees. He dropped a few coins on the bar. "You want to know why I'm feeding you?" he finally said, voice like boots through gravel. "It's because someone should have back then, and no one did." He turned to go. I stepped in front of him. "My name's Clara Dean." "I know." "How?" He looked past me, like answering that would cost him too much. Then, "She reminds me of someone." He nodded toward the window. "June, waiting outside in her worn boots and Henry's too big a coat." "Who?" I asked. He didn't say, just tipped his hat and walked past. That night, another plate showed up, hot as ever. I didn't ask again, but I started watching. Every step he took, every glance, I wasn't sure if he was a ghost from the past or a man trying to rewrite his own story, one crust of bread at a time. But I knew this much. He wasn't just helping. He was atoning.
3 days later, the sheriff called a gathering. Said it was for civic clarity. Said too many folks had started relying on outside mercy and not enough on law and order. Crowley always had a way of making starvation sound like a lack of discipline. He stood on the old church steps in his double-stitched coat, same one he wore when he seized the last flour shipment for malicious storage. The man liked his speeches, said 'em slow so the weight could sink in. "Someone's interfering with the natural balance of this town," he said, voice cutting clean across the square. "Bread's being left where there should be none. Families fed without registry. This kindness, it's a crime without name." Folks didn't cheer. They didn't boo either. Just shifted their boots in the dust and tried not to look hungry. That's when Gideon stepped forward. I didn't know his name till then, but the way Crowley said it, tight-lipped, like the syllables were sour, I knew they had history. "Sheriff," Gideon said, hands free, no iron on him. "Maybe the crime ain't in feeding 'em. Maybe it's in letting 'em starve." The square went still, not silent, still, like the wind held its breath. Crowley tilted his head, smiled small. "You setting yourself up as savior, Gideon," he said, "or just itching for a noose again?" That word, again, hung in the air like smoke. Gideon didn't blink, just said, "Some debts don't clear easy." I don't know what came over me, but I stepped forward too. Clara Dean, no rifle, no badge, just calloused hands and a mother's fury. "Gideon ain't setting himself up as nothing," I said. "He's feeding the hungry. If that's your crime, then hell's already moved to Granger." Crowley's lip curled, but he backed down. Said he'd be watching. Promised there'd be consequences for disorder. And then he walked away, boots echoing like hammers in an empty barn. Later, I found Gideon leaning against the side of the mill, cleaning his nails with a splinter. "You didn't have to speak up," he said. "I didn't do it for you," I answered. He smiled, not with his mouth, just his eyes. We weren't allies, not yet, but I'd seen what he stood for. He wasn't saving us out of pity. He was standing between us and the fire, and I wasn't sure which would burn hotter, Crowley's wrath or the past Gideon carried like a loaded pistol. Gideon slept near the woodpile behind my cabin. Said he didn't need shelter, just a roof for the night sounds. But I knew better. He was staying close in case Crowley made his move. One night, after the children were down, I brought him coffee in a tin cup and sat on the porch. The stars were dim, clouds coming in heavy like they knew something was brewing. I finally asked it straight. Why us? He didn't answer right away, just stared out at the field that used to be corn before the river turned crooked. Then he said, "There was a boy once, caught stealing a biscuit. Sheriff had me throw him in the lockup. I watched his jaw tighten. Winter hit early. By the time I realized what that boy's pa had tried to do, smuggle food to the family, it was too late. Wife and baby froze in the dugout. He died a week later, shackled and half out of his mind." He looked down at his hands like he could still feel the cold iron. "I didn't mean harm, but I did harm. That's worse somehow." I didn't speak, just sipped my coffee. I left the badge, rode west. Figured if I could stop one family from turning to bones in a shallow grave, maybe I could, I don't know, make the ground give something back. I looked at him then, not as a stranger, but as a man who'd been hollowed out by duty, then rebuilt by guilt. He glanced toward the cabin, where Henry had rigged a blanket to stop the wind coming through the boards. He said, "She reminds me of my sister, the one who never made it past her third winter." That was the first time I saw his eyes go wet. "You're not feeding us because you see us. You're feeding us because you saw them." He nodded once. We didn't talk more that night, but the next morning he knocked on the door and handed me a folded paper, a map. He said, "I know where Crowley keeps his ledgers, water records, tax rolls, proof he's been bleeding this town for 5 years." I opened the door wider, just a crack. "If we do this, we don't run." He met my eyes. "We fight." We shook on it. No oath, no pledge. Just a pact made between two people who'd seen too many graves and not enough justice. The lock on Crowley's office wasn't much, just brass and bluff. Gideon had it picked before the moon crested the barn roof. We'd waited till the saloon emptied out. Crowley always took his brandy late and slow. By the time his boots hit the stairs, we were already inside the back office, breath tight, nerves tighter. I lit the lamp low. Ledger books lined the shelf, dust heavy and neat. Gideon grabbed 3, opened them one by one. "Look here," he whispered, finger landing on an entry. 2 shipments of grain. Only 1 ever reached the co-op. The rest rerouted under his brother's name. Each page was like a noose tightening, records of theft, hoarded supplies, falsified tax rolls, and forged court seals. Then we heard it. A boot step. Gideon froze. I shoved the ledgers under my shawl. The door creaked open. Crowley. He didn't look surprised, didn't raise a gun. Just walked in and sat behind the desk like he'd invited us in for tea. "You'll come for it soon, won't you, Gideon?" he said, voice cool as cellar stone. "Whatever redemption you think you're due." Gideon didn't answer. Crowley leaned back. "I remember the day you quit. Thought you were too queen for this town. Turns out you just wanted a different brand of filth." I could feel my fingers tightening around the spine of the ledger. He was baiting us, daring us to swing first. "Best you leave now," Crowley said, tapping the desk, "before you end up buried in one of your righteous ledgers." We backed out slow. My heart was beating in my ears. Once outside, Gideon grabbed my arm and we ran, out the alley, past the horses, up through the dry creek bed. We didn't stop till we reached the cabin. Henry met us at the door, face pale. June was already asleep, curled tight under Gideon's old coat. I handed him the ledgers. He laid them on the table like Holy Writ. "We've got him," I said, breathless. "No," he replied, voice grim. "We've warned him." I knew then Crowley wouldn't wait for the law to catch up. We had to move fast. But not away. Through. I left before sunup. Didn't wake Gideon. Didn't leave a note. Just packed the ledgers in June's old flour sack, strapped on Henry's coat, and walked west towards San Arlen, where Judge Boone still held court in the old Spanish mission house. It was 60 miles if you took the ridge line, longer if you avoided the patrols. I chose longer. No horse, no rifle, just boots, blistered and loud in the silence, and a woman's will that had outlived winter, shame, and now love. 2 days in, the cold started biting. I chewed pine bark, drank creek water thick with silt, kept my hand on the sack like it was a child. Those ledgers weighed more than gold. They held names, signatures, records of the way power starved people with a smile. By the 3rd day, I staggered, fell twice. Once on a rock, blooded my lip. I don't remember sleeping, but I must have. Woke with frost on my lashes. San Arlen rose out of the morning mist like a half-finished prayer. Judge Boone didn't trust me at first. I looked like a vagrant. He asked where my husband was. "Dead," I said, but he wouldn't have had the stomach for this anyway. I laid the ledgers on his desk. He flipped through the pages, jaw setting tighter with each turn. "You're saying Sheriff Crowley falsified grain requisitions for 5 seasons?" "No, sir," I said. "I'm proving it." His eyes met mine. Not soft, but honest. "You know what happens if this is true?" he asked. "I do." "And if it's false?" "I hang." He nodded, called for his deputies. Within the hour, a posse was saddled and riding. I drank warm broth on his porch, legs trembling, but heart firm. We made it back to Granger by nightfall. The sky glowed red before we reached the ridge. The cabin was on fire. I screamed her name, June, then Henry's. Gideon was already there, gun drawn, silhouette sharp against the blaze. Crowley's men were retreating, but not gone. I didn't wait for orders. I charged. The fire cast long shadows, twisting, violent things that danced across the snow-patched dirt like devils fleeing a sermon. I found June wrapped in a quilt out by the tree line. Henry'd hidden her in a dry gulch, told her not to make a sound no matter what she heard.
His lip was split, his eyes swollen, but that boy stood guard with a hatchet like a man 3 times his age. Inside the cabin, flames licked the rafters. Gideon burst out coughing, soot-smeared and wild-eyed, dragging one of Crowley's men by the collar. The man coughed blood and begged to be spared. Gideon dropped him in the snow. "You want mercy?" he growled. "Go ask the sheriff who lit the match." And then came the hooves. The posse thundered in, Judge Boone at the front, his robe billowing under his oilskin coat. Deputies flanked him, rifles up, voices raised. Crowley stood across the yard, hands still clean, boots unburned. "You're trespassing on sovereign ground," he called out. "This is county jurisdiction." "Not anymore," Boone replied, holding up the ledgers. "You been hoarding, stealing, falsifying, and killing by proxy. You're done." Crowley laughed, a dry little chuckle like a man who'd seen 100 threats fail. But Boone wasn't bluffing. He stepped down, placed a hand on Gideon's shoulder. "You got witnesses?" he asked. "I got graves," Gideon answered. "And I got ink," Boone said, raising the book. Crowley's smile faded. The arrest happened quiet, no shootout, just the slow press of inevitability. One by one, the townsfolk emerged from cellars, sheds, ruins, watching the man who starved 'em get shackled like a common thief. No cheers, just silence. But it was a different silence this time. Not fear, relief. That winter, the town rebuilt, the co-op reopened, food lines formed, not out of desperation, but distribution. People started nodding at each other again, little things. Henry built a wood box for scraps. June helped an old widow carry coal. The air felt less heavy. As for me and Gideon, we didn't speak much of the fire. We just started building again. No blueprints, just nails and purpose. And one night, not long after, there came a knock at our half-hung door. A woman, hollow-eyed, dust-caked, holding the boy no older than June. She looked down, ashamed. I heard... She didn't finish. I stepped aside, pulled the door wider. "Do you like honey?" I asked, hand on the kettle. Her eyes filled. She nodded. Years pass quiet when you're not counting them. A cabin turned to a house. Not big, but sturdy. 2 rooms, a porch, a chimney that never smoked right, but never quit either. We never got rings, me and Gideon. Just a look one morning over coffee and a nod that said, "I'm not going anywhere unless you do first." Folks started calling it the Dean place. We never corrected 'em. June took to reading. Henry learned to shoe horses from a rancher downriver. The woman who knocked on our door that night stayed too. Named her boy Thomas after his pa. Turned out she could sew like a dream. Patched every blanket we had, then started mending the town. One afternoon, maybe 6, 7 seasons after the fire, Thomas tugged at my sleeve while I was shelling peas. "Miss Clara," he said, "what's this worth?" He held up a coin, bent, tarnished, not more than a nickel. Found it under the floorboards. I looked at it a long while. "In money," I said, "not much." Then I smiled. "In memory, more than you'd think." He didn't get it yet, but one day he would. See, what we built wasn't just a home. It was a hearth, one that never went cold, not because we kept the fire burning, but because we never stopped opening the door. Every month or two, someone new'd show up. a girl carrying her brother, a man with no boots. Once, a mother and child with their faces wrapped in gauze, burned. Didn't ask how. We fed 'em. Sometimes they stayed. Sometimes they just slept one night on the porch and left with bread in their pack and tears in their eyes. Gideon had watched from the edge of the field, leaning on his shovel like it was a staff. He'd say, "Every one of 'em's a story we get to rewrite." One spring, he caught fever. Didn't suffer long, just got quiet, then quieter, then still. We buried him beneath the big sycamore, near where we first laid June when the world tried to take her. I placed a flat stone, no carving, just the ring I'd once traded for bread, now laid on top. He must have found it somehow, slipped it into my sewing tin when I wasn't looking. I sat there a long while, hands folded, fire crackling behind me, and I said, "You paid it, Gideon. Whatever debt you owed, you paid it in full."